The events you're about to see are based on real accounts. To protect the identities of those involved, names and details have been changed. My name is Harrison Blake. I'm 38 years old and I live in Denver, Colorado. I'm going to tell you something that happened to me and my family about 3 years ago, but it still gives me chills every time I think about it. We've always liked having pets, and after our last dog, Max, passed away, we decided it was time to adopt another one. We went to a local shelter and fell in love with a 2-year-old German Shepherd named Duke. He was super sweet, obedient, and seemed to have a great temperament, so we didn't hesitate and took him home. But since day one, I noticed something weird going on, especially when it came to our bedroom. As soon as we got home, Duke started exploring everything, in that curious way that a new dog does. He ran through the living room, sniffed the kitchen, checked out the backyard, but when he got to the door of our bedroom, he just stopped. He froze right there, ears up and tail down, like he was seeing something. I tried calling him, but he wouldn't move. I even tried pulling him with the leash, but he started growling softly, which he hadn't done until then. It was odd, but I thought it was just some silly fear, or maybe a bad memory from before the adoption. In the first few days, Duke avoided the bedroom altogether. If we were in there, he would lie down in the hallway and stare at the door, but never go in. One day, I decided to see what would happen if I actually took him inside. I picked him up, which wasn't easy because he was heavy, and put him on the floor of the room. As soon as his paws hit the floor, he started growling again, but this time it was much louder. The worst part was that he wasn't growling at me or my wife, but at a specific spot in the room, near the window. We joked about it, saying it was some animal outside he was sniffing, but deep down, I knew something was off. That night, I woke up in the middle of the night to hear Duke barking like crazy in the hallway. He was facing the bedroom door, his fur standing on end and barking non-stop. I went to check, half asleep, and tried to calm him down, but he only stopped when I closed the door. As soon as the door closed, he backed off like he had finally relaxed. My wife and I were left wondering what could be causing all this, but nothing made sense. There was nothing in the room or outside of it. After that, it started becoming a routine. Every time we tried to bring Duke into the bedroom, he would flip out. There were days when we could get him on the bed, but as soon as he got close to the window corner, he would start growling and barking at nothing. There was one night when I was home alone, and I heard Duke barking from the hallway. When I got there, he was lying flat on the floor, eyes fixed on the bedroom door, and growling softly. I felt a chill go down my spine, because that's when I realized he wasn't just scared. He was protecting us from something. I decided to investigate the house a bit more because it was starting to get to me. I went to the city office to pull up the property's history, and I found out that the house was relatively new, built about 15 years ago. But then, talking to an older neighbor, I learned that the land, before it became residential lots, had an old house on it, which burned down, killing a man who had lived there alone. This happened about 50 years ago. I couldn't find much else about the guy or what really happened there, but it was hard to shake the feeling. After I learned that, I started paying more attention to that corner of the room. At night, when everything was quiet, I swear you could feel the air getting colder there. My wife noticed it too, but we kind of forced ourselves to ignore it so we wouldn't freak out. Duke, on the other hand, wasn't letting it go. Every time we tried to get him in, he would freeze or start growling again. One day, while I was cleaning the floor near the window, I noticed a mark on the wall, barely visible, kind of hidden by the furniture. It was a weird scratch, almost like someone had clawed the wall hard. I tried to ignore it, but it kept sticking with me. I talked to my wife about moving to a different room, but she thought I was overreacting. Then one night, I woke up to a strange noise coming from the room. It sounded like a soft scraping, like someone was running their nails across the wall. I got up slowly and turned on the light. Nothing. But Duke was standing at the door, ears back, growling softly. I decided to leave the door open that night, and Duke stayed there on guard. The next morning, when I told my wife, she said she'd felt a weight on the bed during the night, like someone had sat down. After that, I decided to call a pastor to bless the house. I'm not particularly religious, but at that point, I was willing to try anything. The pastor came, said a prayer, and sprinkled holy water all over the room. Strangely, after that, Duke started going into the bedroom, but he still avoided the corner by the window. He seemed calmer, but I couldn't fully relax. Months went by, and nothing strange happened again. Duke started sleeping in our room, but never too close to the window. To this day, I can't explain what happened, but I'm sure whatever it was, Duke knew it was there, something we couldn't see. My name is Thomas, I'm 42 years old, and I live in a small town called Maplewood in Massachusetts. I was never really into believing in paranormal stuff, but what happened in my house a few years ago left me so disturbed that even today I can't explain it. I still think about it sometimes, wondering if it really happened, or if my mind just played a trick on me. The fact is, I'm not the same person after what I experienced there. The house where I live is over 100 years old. When we bought it, we knew it would need a lot of renovations, but the structure was good and the location was perfect. From the beginning, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. My wife Linda and I spent weeks organizing, painting the walls and setting up the furniture. Then one day, we started noticing something strange with our cat, Buster. He was a calm feline, always relaxed, but in the last few days, something seemed off. Sometimes he'd just freeze and stare at random spots, like he was focused on something no one else could see. It made me uncomfortable, but I brushed it off, thinking he was just being a cat. Things got weird one night. We were in the living room watching TV when suddenly Buster started acting odd. He was standing still in the middle of the room, tense, his fur standing on end, eyes locked on something in the corner. It wasn't like he was staring out of the window or at a visible object. It was just empty space. I called for him several times, but he didn't move. Then he made this little jump back, arching his back like he was preparing to attack something invisible. Linda noticed the same thing and asked, "Is it happening again?" She had mentioned that Buster had done this a few times before, but I never took it seriously. When we were alone, she would tell me that Buster seemed to see things we couldn't. I didn't buy into it, but his behavior was starting to make me uneasy. That same night, things escalated. We were all about to go to bed when we heard a sound coming from the hallway. It wasn't loud, just a soft, continuous noise, almost like light footsteps. I thought it was just the old wooden floor creaking, but Buster got agitated, growling and scratching at our bedroom door. I went out to the hallway, trying to figure out what was going on. There was nothing there. Nothing I could see, anyway. Over the next few days, Buster's behavior got worse. He would always be staring at the same spots in the house, sometimes backing away like he had been pushed by something. One night, he hid behind the couch and refused to come out for hours, even when we called him. When we finally pulled him out, he looked more terrified than usual. I decided to do some research on the house. I didn't want to believe in anything supernatural, but the coincidences were starting to get to me. I found out that the house had been built in the early 1900s, and before we moved in, the family who lived there had lost a young child. The story wasn't clear on exactly what had happened, but the boy had died under mysterious circumstances, and since then, rumors about the house had circulated in the neighborhood. As much as I tried to ignore the stories, Buster's behavior wouldn't let me. One night, after he started acting even stranger, Linda suggested that we call in an expert, like a medium or someone who could help. I was skeptical, but I was also getting desperate, so we did. The medium came over, and when he stepped into the hallway, he seemed uncomfortable. He didn't say much at first, just looked around at the spots Buster had been staring at. At that point, I started doubting my own sanity. I didn't know if I was actually seeing these things, or if my mind was playing tricks on me. The next morning, the medium told us that the spirit of a child was trapped there, possibly because something had never been resolved. He suggested we perform some sort of cleansing, something symbolic to try and restore peace. At that moment, I just wanted everything to stop. The cleansing was done, but the truth is, I never looked at the house the same way again. Buster stopped acting strange, but for some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still there. I tried to rationalize everything, but to this day, when I'm alone in the house, I feel a presence in the air, something I can't explain. I don't know if it was really the spirit of a child or if my mind just made everything up, but the fact is, Buster never saw anything again, and yet, sometimes I feel like something is still watching. All of this happened 3 years ago, but the feelings of discomfort and unease have stayed with me. The cat doesn't see anything anymore, but sometimes I still feel like I'm being watched. I don't know if I can trust my own senses anymore after everything I've been through. My name is Derek Miller, I'm 39 years old, and I live in Spokane, Washington. What I'm about to tell you happened 5 years ago, but to this day, I still can't fully understand what went on in that house. I don't think I ever will, and honestly, I'm even afraid to try. At the time, my wife Emily and I had just lost our baby. Little Ben, who never had a chance to live outside of Emily's womb for more than 3 months. It was a hard blow to swallow. The room we had prepared with so much love for him was still there, the crib neatly arranged and the changing table filled with tiny clothes. But the worst part wasn't the pain of losing our child. It was what happened afterward. Right after the loss, we started noticing strange things happening around the house. Nothing too obvious at first, but little details that began to bother us. Our family dog, Buddy, had always been calm. A black lab, affectionate, loved playing with Ben, and it was almost like they were best friends. But after the loss, Buddy started acting weird. At first I thought it was just his mourning, you know? He missed the little one too. But soon I realized I was wrong. One night I was in the living room watching TV when Emily called me frantically from the baby's room. "Derek, come here, quick!" I ran to the room and what I saw left me speechless. Buddy was standing at the door, his fur raised, growling softly. He wasn't looking at us, but at the empty crib. What scared me even more was that he was staring at the space above the crib, barking and growling as if he was staring at something we couldn't see. Emily was in panic, saying he was seeing something. I tried to calm her down, but I was starting to feel a chill down my spine too. Buddy had never acted like this before. He was being aggressive, but also seemed protective of something, like he was trying to protect us from something. In the following days, things only got worse. Buddy started keeping an eye on the crib at all times. When we were in the living room, he would stay by the bedroom door, and at night he would bark so loudly it almost made us jump out of bed. It was like he was trying to alert us to something. And as strange as it sounds, I started to feel like there was something there in the room, something that shouldn't be there. It was then that one night, after a whole week of Buddy's bizarre behavior, I decided to investigate. I was so uncomfortable with the situation that I couldn't stand it anymore. I went to the room, turned off the lights, and tried to see what was going on. When I entered, Buddy was there, staring at the same place above the crib. He didn't move an inch, just kept growling. I tried to touch him, call his name, but he didn't react. The growling only got louder, and then, suddenly, everything went silent. I don't know how to explain it, but at that moment, I felt that something was wrong. Something that shouldn't be there. That's when I decided to do some research. I searched online, in forums, and even asked some older people in our town. A lot of them talked about spiritual presence. Some believed that animals could sense things that we humans can't perceive, but no one could tell me exactly what was happening in that house. Over time, Buddy's behavior started getting even weirder. He wasn't just guarding the crib, he started barking and growling at the space above it, day and night. We began to believe that he was trying to communicate with something. He would stay there for hours, not moving a muscle, just with his eyes fixed, barking and growling. When Emily or I tried to approach, he would back away with a suspicious look, as if he didn't want anyone near. It didn't take long before the rest of the house started to feel the tension. We began hearing strange noises at night, things falling for no reason. For a while, Emily and I tried to ignore it, but we couldn't avoid what was happening. There was something in the baby's room, something we couldn't see, but Buddy somehow knew was there. He was protecting us from something. After a few weeks, we decided to move out. We couldn't live with it anymore. Even with everything we tried, nothing seemed to help. I still remember the last time we saw Buddy standing in the baby's room. He was staring at the space above the crib, growling and barking, and in that moment I realized that despite our pain and what had happened, something was still there. Something that didn't belong. Something Buddy was sensing, and that, to this day, I can't explain. We moved to another place, and Buddy's behavior stopped immediately. But to this day, when I look at the empty crib, I wonder, what exactly was Buddy seeing? What was he trying to tell us? I still don't know, but the feeling that something remained there haunts me to this day. My name is Ryan. I'm 33 years old, and I live in a small town in rural Illinois. I've never been superstitious or believed in supernatural things, but what happened that night completely changed my perspective. I honestly don't know how to explain it, and to this day, I still feel uncomfortable whenever I think about it. It was about 2 years ago, and I still haven't figured out what happened. It all started on a regular night. I was home alone, just back from work preparing for a quiet evening. I'm not one to go out much, so the idea of staying at home with my cat always seemed appealing. His name is Jasper, and he's always been a pretty chill cat. Sometimes he would get up to some mischief, but nothing serious. That day, though, he seemed quieter than usual, curled up in a corner of the couch. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until things started happening. I was sitting in my room, reading a book, when I started noticing something strange. Jasper, who was lying on the rug near the bed, suddenly raised his head and fixed his gaze on the ceiling. He wasn't just looking, he was following something. His eyes would move to the right, then to the left, and I swear he was seeing something move up there. That was enough to make me feel uneasy. The sensation that something was wrong hit me immediately. But the strangest thing came next. Jasper suddenly got up, still staring at the ceiling, and started walking in circles around the bed, as if trying to hide from something invisible. He stopped abruptly, and with a speed I had never seen before, ran off to the hallway. He was so fast that I barely saw his movements. I got up from the bed and followed him, more out of curiosity than anything else. I reached the living room and found the cat again, this time staring intently at the wall, his fur standing on end. He was meowing softly, but not moving. I tried calling him, but he didn't respond. That was when I really felt the weight in the air, something I can't quite describe, but it felt wrong. Like the atmosphere had thickened, like the house had become a strange place, out of place. I thought maybe he was scared of some sound or movement that I hadn't noticed, so I decided to check outside the window. There was nothing. The street was silent. When I returned inside, I noticed that Jasper wasn't in the living room anymore. I went to the kitchen, and there he was, staring at the ceiling again. This time, his fur was completely bristled, and his eyes were locked on a specific spot, as if he was watching something move. The most disturbing thing was when he ran to the other side of the house, still looking at the ceiling, as though he was following something no one else could see. I ran after him, not knowing what else to do. He seemed to be in a trance, as if he were chasing something. He reached my office, stopped in the middle of the room, and started meowing softly again, like he was interacting with something invisible. I was starting to get completely freaked out. Seriously, I didn't know what to think. I sat in the chair watching him, hoping he'd finally relax, but he kept doing this strange behavior. For a moment, I wondered if there was something in the air, maybe a strange smell I hadn't noticed, or some sound disturbing the cat. But deep down, I knew that what was happening was something I couldn't understand. The feeling of being watched, of being observed by something invisible, was overwhelming. By 3 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. Jasper was still running through the house, moving from one room to another, stopping, looking at the ceiling in different places, always with the same terrified expression. I thought about leaving the house, but the thought of leaving him alone made me even more scared. I tried calling the vet, but no one was answering at that time of night. I was getting exhausted, and the sense of panic only grew stronger. Then the strangest thing happened. Out of nowhere, Jasper stopped in the middle of the hallway, looked at the ceiling one last time, and then, with a look I'll never forget, ran to the front door and started meowing intensely, as if he wanted to leave the house. I opened the door, and suddenly he stopped, looked at me and ran out of the house. He had never been the type to go outside at night. At that moment, the fear I was feeling turned into total confusion. What was that? I stood at the door for a while, trying to process everything that had happened, but nothing made sense. The cat came back home a few hours later, but he never behaved the same way. He became quiet and just seemed to watch me, as if waiting for something to happen. The strangest thing is that after that night, everything in my house returned to normal, and I never saw Jasper act like he did that night again. To this day, I have no idea what happened. I don't have an explanation, and maybe that's the scariest part of it all. I looked up stories of cats acting strangely, and some people talk about cats reacting things that we, humans, can't perceive. But none of that gives me a satisfying explanation. I still get chills when I think back to that night, and I can't help but wonder, what if that was, in some way, a warning? I've never looked at the ceiling of my room the same way again. I don't know what Jasper saw that night, but whatever it wasn't meant for him. Or maybe he was just trying to protect us from something. I'll never know. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like to support the community. And if you're not subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new content. See you next time.